Welcome to the Digible Dudes podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
And Reid, today we're going to talk about partnerships. That was a fun topic that you brought up to say, how is Digible thinking about partnerships in 21 and what that really means for us? And we just have a pretty open dialogue about it. And to that point, I was going to segue for our intro into some news that we saw last week or the week before. But SEMRush was going to be one of our partners at one point with Fiona. And they're going public. And I thought that was really interesting news because SEMRush is one of the most recognizable tools in the ad tech space. But it was really fun to see some of their numbers. And again, we were going to partner with them. We still use them, but they aren't as much of the backbone as we had hoped that they were. So what do you think about this SEMRush move?
Well, I will just confess that I haven't read up much about it. So all I can offer is some raw reaction or thoughts. It's a surprise to me. I will just hope that they have a pretty dynamic roadmap. They definitely have been a household name, I feel like, for 20 years, at least for me. Like, I can't remember not knowing about them. So they definitely have, good equity. I couldn't say much as far as reputation. The account managers I've worked with have just, been standard account managers. So I don't have any C-suite connections or anything like that to speak of. But the reason it surprises me a little bit is it's like, whether it's reporting, there's all these like kind of piping to ad technology, and what determines why, when one of them is going to go public versus when they don't. And the majority, I feel like, don't. And it's probably because they either don't have the roadmap or, of course, haven't established enough of a financial proposition to get people excited about it. So, even with like a platform like an SEMRush, I feel like, the margins haven't always shown to be all that great. And maybe, they've been an exception to that. So even the back end, I am speaking outside of service. I just don't feel like the financial makeup that you look for often presents itself when it comes to these ad tech companies. I could be wrong. I don't have a list in front of me to know how many of them have actually done it and been successful with it. But I'll just say, the whole thing surprises me a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know a lot about their funding history ahead of the announcement. They had raised $40 million in revenue back in, I think it was like 20. Let me check it. I think it was 2018. Yeah, and so they weren't like completely like bootstrapped, which is different than like a MailChimp, right? Like a MailChimp wanted to be bootstrapped and remain private and just build a great company forever. But they hadn't raised nearly the amount of money that the other companies had. So it seems like they could have kept doing their thing. But since you haven't read as much up on the stats, Reid, I've got a couple of interesting ones from their S1, which is what you submit when you go public. So let's play a little bit of a guessing game. How many
make me look like an idiot?
How many paying customers do you think they had in 2020?
Oh my God. Well, they're affordable enough for the garage shop, that probably means there's quite a few. So, oh my God, this is just
$99 a month is their like sticker price.
I thought it was up to $199, but maybe that's just what we bought into.
Yeah, they have some plans, but yeah.
How many? I'll say 10,000.
67,000.
Yeah, as soon as I said that, I was like, that's way too light.
They had, when they crossed 1,000 customers was back in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And they only really gave us revenue back to 2013, so we don't have everything. Okay, you're really big on academies, like universities and stuff, meaning like online learning, and you have this, Digital University is something that you are super pumped to do. How many certificates do you think they've issued through their SEMRush Academy?
67,000.
130,000. About double. Not a bad, but with your 67, I remember when we went to Google when they brought us there like 2 years ago, and they were saying that there were between, by Google's estimate, 20 and 30,000 agencies in the US. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to remember. I think you're right. I think that was the range they gave us, was somewhere between 20 and 30, like legit agencies, right? Not the kid in his garage.
Well, yeah, they didn't quite define it. They were just like, as far as like possible Google partners, they were basically saying there's between 20 and 30,000, but they didn't say if that was like somebody running $1 million in the garage. That can happen, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about that, let's use their number and round up and say 30,000 agencies. And if they have 67,000 paying customers, man, they've really expanded a lot internationally, right? They would have had to, because you're not going to have 100% penetration. It's pretty incredible to me that they have, they do have subscriptions at 99 and 199 and above. When we were looking at them as a data provider for Fiona, I feel like that's a fun fact, but we were going to use them, and you reached out and got some quotes. Do you remember what those quotes were?
Yeah. It was, I feel like north of $200,000.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was almost 300 grand in annual. And that was before we got like as big as we are. We were like, this is like month 3 of building the platform. You're like, oh, we need the SEMRush API. And your sales rep was like 300K. And you're like, yeah, we'll be right back to you.
Yeah, like in a decade.
Well, okay, let's hit revenue. How you mentioned about revenue. How much do you think they did in 2020?
110 million.
Very close, 125 million. And you want to guess what the margin is on that?
At least 40%.
They took home 92 million.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's the gross margin, or that's like the net OP, like
that's
the net margin?
Net OP.
Wow, that's incredible.
Insane. 125. Sorry, to take 95.
Now I know why now that explains it. That's
well,
phenomenal.
Maybe, right? Because I let's say that we were in that position. Why the hell would you go public if you're throwing off 95 million a year? I mean, yes, probably the investors, those investors that put in 40 million, but at that point you could still pay back like dividends and just be like, well, screw you very much, right? We're just going to like keep owning this thing. But once you go public, there's just such a headache and you can't make your own decisions. So unless maybe the founders now that, as you said, they've been around forever, maybe they're just like ready to get the heck out of there and go do something else with themselves. But when you are that profitable, to me, it's like, I don't need to go to Wall Street.
Yeah. It makes you wonder. Well, it's not a question of whether somebody's gotten greedy. It's more who's gotten greedy. Is it the founders? Is it the investors? Like, what's really prompting that? But we can only dream. One day we'll have to make the decision like that.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. I missed this number before. I see what happened. So that was removing marketing expense from their cost. This is fun. Maybe you can do some math on what Digible should be spending on marketing, but take a guess at their marketing cost.
Well, they have to spend, it'd almost be hypocritical not to, right? A pretty good chunk of change on their search business. So this is about the CAC or whatever. I'll say 15 million?
54 million.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is crazy because I feel like I don't see them anywhere. Maybe it's because like they're like excluding me because they're like, oh, you guys already pay for this thing.
Well, search any kind of BI related like phrase match. You're going to find SEMRush. So my guess is that 90% of that is in search. I don't feel like they do much. Like I've never heard them on the radio, seen them on TV. I don't think I've even been retargeted, even though I've been to their site. Like I think almost all that's in search.
Yeah, you're probably right because the cost per click on that type of technology is super expensive. Like last time I looked, like digital agency cost per click was like $45. So I can only imagine on these type of tools what it would be. And usually when it comes to a SaaS tool, most companies for growth are willing to spend 12 to 18 months of payback period. So that means that you'd be willing to spend like $1,500 to acquire a new customer at $99 a month. Even so, I still hold true. Like you could shut off marketing. When I look at their cohorts, because they did line out their cohorts, but people that sign on with them stay longer than 10 years. So it's like, I can see why you want to like really go to like, if I spend 1 year of capital to get somebody and then I'm going to hold them for 9 years, that does make sense. But you could still totally not spend $54 million next year. And I feel like, yeah, maybe your growth will slow, but you could still then collect $50 million, at the end of the year. So, well, anyways, that was my thing on SEMRush. I wonder what this will do to others. I mean, obviously you and I are super fans of Moz because of what Rand did with his book. But they were not growing like this, according to his book and the numbers we've seen. But if the way that the markets are so frothy right now, it's like I could understand that even without high growth, that Amaz is like, hey, maybe we should look at this too, because if this one goes well, it's just people are really interested in ad tech, even if you are only growing. I say only growing at like 10% a year or something.
Yeah, we shall see. Is this still
All
the
right.
intro to partnerships, or?
Yeah, no, we're good now. All right, so stay tuned if you want to hear Reid and I talk through partnerships. But yeah, I thought it was a fun episode where we just think openly about how we're planning to approach partnerships in 21 and beyond. Okay, Reid. So I don't know if I want to say this is a topic bomb or something, but we were just talking about like learning in public and just being, as we typically are, more vulnerable and just public with where our heads are at. And you had mentioned that partnerships are a thing that we're hitting really hard in 21. So before 21, we hadn't really focused on developing partners for Digible, besides like our vendors, but other relationships with other vendors in the space. Certainly we've in the apartment space. Certainly we've been super friendly with lots of companies in the space for a long time. I can't think of anybody we've chosen to be an enemy. There are a few that aren't super fans of us for one reason or another. Usually they see us as competitive. But our I guess development as a company in 21 is moving where we have a high concentration on partnerships. So you thought it'd be fun to kind of get into that on today's episode. So maybe why, Reid? Give us the why partnerships for Digible. I mean, we've got a good thing going, so why jump into that now?
Yeah, well, I think it's a natural, I guess, maturation or progression for a lot of companies. And it's not always bred out of like plateauing on your current client, like TAM, if or the TAM or whatever, your current client growth. For us, there's some of that, as far as why now. But I also think, it's pursuing the opportunity, and sometimes that's, well, these all seem very generic, but just is more available for some than others. But for us, especially with the technology side and a lot of the automation that we're building, it's really just feels like it's time to start warming these things up and seeing who we are really a good fit with. I think we're going about it so far the right way, which is just really pretty informal conversations, a lot of discovery, which you'd expect. But, I think we understand that not everybody is going to be the right fit. And sometimes those are tough choices, where it's like, well, culturally, how much should that matter with like a business partnership? It's not the same as like people that you're hiring and like what you're doing, I guess, internally with your core values and stuff. But when you read a lot of these books, which we've been reading, they say that should, define you kind of every step of the way. And so, not to focus on that one area, but it's just been something that has, I've been thinking more about as we continue to have these conversations, who's the right fit, for Digible. And I came at it, you mentioned right before we hopped on, but just being in larger companies, working through those partnerships, and it's such a different animal. I think when you're the smaller company that's obviously trying to kind of build your identity and build your brand, than being the big dog that just has what feels like a revolving door of those. So, there's all sorts of things that have been fascinating. I think it's a pivotal point for us as far as our journey as a business. And I'm excited about it. I think we're lucky in the aspect that in this industry, there are a lot of great folks out there that make sense for us practically, but also culturally.
Yeah, well, I'd say that there are a couple constraints. Well, not constraints, I guess, like as you're saying, maturation. I think we've talked about this before, but when we founded Digible, we said we didn't want to become a boiler room agency. So we were saying at the max we ever want to get to is 150 people. More recently, we've been questioning that if we want to even get to 150 people. We just crossed the 50-person mark, and it's taken us, we're getting close to 4 years in business now. And there's a certain amount of momentum that we feel. So to your point, like we're not slowing down our growth, or our growth hasn't slowed down. And because of that momentum, as we start to forecast, like, what do the next 4 years or 10 years look like for us? We have to look way ahead and start turning the ship, or at least like considering other things. Otherwise, before you know it, you can't, like, if we're at 120 people, we can't really stop the momentum all of a sudden and say, hey, we're getting close to that 150. So we got to start changing course. And the reason I say that is because there are certainly a lot of people, like I think of this one founder that I follow, Rob Walling, but he wrote a book called Start Small, Stay Small. And it's all about building like a really like profitable small business and not trying to rush the venture route and get too big. I agree with a lot of what he says. What I disagree with is he often thinks a lot about the economics and how, like, well, Digible should stay at 25 people when we are 25 people because of all these other reasons. But obviously for you, me, and just about everybody that joins Digible, we always want to be pushing the envelope and growing and developing in some way. And so currently, if we are forecasting ahead at our current growth rate before the next 10 years, we'd have to slow ourselves down, or we're going to go past that 150. And now we're saying maybe we don't even want to get that big. Maybe we want to get to 100. But what happens with our happiness and how much, how excited we are to get up every day if we've maxed our people and we don't have any other way to express our creativity and innovation and, as I said, just push the envelope. So that has at least me thinking a lot more about it earlier, because we've got to set the stage now for what, 5-10 years from now holds if we keep our current rate. And so to your point, like about the industry, when we started the industry, I felt really comfortable with the type of marketers and operators that we knew before we started Digible. Just like, hey, these tend to be really good people. Like unlike, just to pick on it, but like when we used to work a lot with attorneys and automotive dealerships and stuff, like those folks are not fun phone calls. Typically, it's just a certain personality. But this industry, everybody just seems cool. I hadn't had a lot of experience with other vendors in the industry before we started Digible. But as the first quarter passes us this year and we've gotten into it, I'm just really excited and blown away by the vendors also in the space. It just seems like there's a lot of really cool people and great people and people willing to work with folks like us in the space that have like minds. And so in a way, that's given me confidence to move more into like official partnership conversations with other vendors and find a way that we can be collaborative. Because as you said, the vendors that we decide to partner with, they can't exactly be totally against our values, or that's going to rub off on us too, right? So I think from a timing perspective, you're right.
Yeah. In a way, not to romanticize, I guess this time or industry, but I do feel like it's a unique time with multifamily, with all the technology that's hitting, the changes in demographics. I mean, I'm sure that this is somewhat cyclical, but the technology piece is still relatively new. We'll just say, all things considered, for multifamily. They been dealing with it in different components, right? Whether it was the accounting, CRM, marketing, like different, it feels like divisions, kind of, that's the ebbs and flows of like how it's all happening. But what I mean by that is I still think there's and I don't mind naming a few names here, but like RealPage doesn't have a great reputation as far as playing nice or integrations. Everybody just looks at them as the evil empire that wants to buy everybody and, whatever. But they're really the outlier if you think about it. With a lot of industries, other industries, that's the norm. And that's what I like that's happening right now is you still have some of these big players in multifamily, but there's way more newbies, people that are trying to disrupt, but I think really have great spirit, intent, and ideas. And that's what I feel like right now, a lot of our conversations, those are the people that we're talking to. So there's this almost, you like to talk about groupthink. It's not the way I want to put it, but just this collective like energy, that's happening, that's fueling a lot of these discussions where people are like, yeah, we should talk. We're not RealPage trying to do a deal with like Yardi or something. Like, we're nimble. We have a lot of ideas, and there may be room for us to do this together.
It's interesting because like you look at the NMHC top 50 list and it's less than 10% of the available like apartment buildings out there. Right. And so a lot of vendors focus on just targeting selling the top 50, but we have found a lot of success. We don't even look at the list. We and most of our business comes from, I mean, we have I don't know, probably almost 10 or we probably have 10 people on the top 50 list that we work with. Right. So we don't like ignore them, but we just don't like make that our mission to go prospect against that. And so most of our business, probably 80%, is coming off the top 50 list. And I feel like the same thing applies when it comes to technology, where you have the big players like a RealPage and a Yardi and Entrata, but each of them have less than 20% of the market. And so it's not like any of them, like, even though you think of them as the big bad gorilla, they're not a monopoly yet, or even, close to it. Right. Even though it may feel like that. So the only one really would be like a CoStar when it comes to, listings effectively. Right. And that's obviously why they had trouble with the RentPath acquisition or attempt. So where do you want to go next? Because I think timing we've covered. I think hopefully people get it. Like we're saying, for scale, that makes sense, right? Because the way we've done the math is like, if we want to have 150 people max, and that means we could maybe handle 3,000 property accounts. And so we have to work backwards from that and say, well, what else are we going to do if we, because we build all this great infrastructure is what you started to get at. And so I feel like a lot of the infrastructure that we have could lend well to other vendors, so they don't have to like focus on something that they don't really want to build. So that's one angle, but certainly, well, I'm sure there's other angles that we're going to think about for partnership too. But right now, that's where my head goes mostly, is like, how can we share the infrastructure and back office stuff that we've built?
Yeah, totally. Well, I did think we could talk, unpack a little bit, like kind of the classifications of partnerships. That it's such a general term, so that's why I think it might be worth it. And then also, you've started a lot of these conversations. I've been in probably on 30 or 40% of them at some point. But so I told you I didn't want to make this about interviewing you, but I think it's interesting, I guess, to hear like what the initial responses have been, reaction, those first discussions. You just had a recent one with Funnel that you said really went well. You and I obviously had drinks with the guys from Cardinal, and we've talked to Perk, we've talked to BetterBot, Resman, Pinwheel, the list goes on. And I feel like there's some common denominators, but obviously there's also some real differences in either how we're approaching them or what the partnership might look like. So whether that's a straight referral deal, whether it's a technology relationship, whether it's really knowledge sharing relationship, whether it's lining up with each other's like weaknesses and strengths, even though we could be direct competitors like we are with 53. There's just all sorts of different variations of this. So if you don't mind, why don't you share just anecdotally a little bit about some of those first conversations, whether they were stunned, whether they were immediately open arms, and kind of how the first hour went, and then we can talk a little bit more maybe about how we see those differences in different types of partnerships.
Well, it's I guess it's interesting because most folks seem to think about partnerships and they think about sales strategy and cross-selling. And so that's not necessarily what I've been thinking. I've been thinking, sure, that there could be something there, but that it's more, I guess, like, I want to hit a gripe real quick. One of my gripes is that the word partner is thrown around so liberally. People are just like, oh, we're partners with Jonah. It's like, I feel like I've heard some of our client services people say that before, and we are super friendly with Jonah, like very friendly, and work on probably 200 of their websites, but it's not, there's nothing like officially penned there. Right. And so one of the things that I'm trying to get very specific with is Nicole has been talking internally a lot about language and how important that is to like be clear about what a partner or real partner or partnership means versus like we're friendly with them. As I sort of mentioned at the top, like we're friendly with just about everybody. We try to be friendly with everybody. Sometimes they kind of like kick us off. I will say when we started the company, I tried to do some partnerships with people, just tried to get early conversations, and I got almost nowhere. I mean, people were like, yeah, okay, cool. You little mosquito, like, don't give a darn about you. But now when we picked this back up at the end of last year, I feel like everybody takes my call and they are excited about it. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled that you reached out, like even just to be friendly, blah, blah, blah. We've heard so much about you. And so we've not been sort of like ghosted at all, versus at the beginning, I just could not barely get anybody to give us the time of day. So I do feel like there's something about like our brand and just how I guess word has traveled about us. And now people, when we come knocking or something, they're like, oh, I've heard about you from other customers, therefore I'll take your call. Versus at the beginning we were small. And I actually felt that when we were back at the Post, we started to get to a certain scale that we could that it was just easy to take our mass and be like, well, if we flip this on for 10%, then, and then all of a sudden, whatever vendor's interested. And so, I feel like that same thing is hitting now, where we have a certain sort of scale, but we also have a certain weight to the brand that just makes it easy to get the call going. And then if we decide to do something, we have to take it more seriously than we would have in the beginning, because if we flip something on, it's not going to be like 10 or 20 accounts that are impacted. I mean, we're talking hundreds of accounts that are going to be impacted now, right? So as far as that first hour conversation, it's gone really well. People are super friendly. They're excited that we've reached out and want to get to know them at all. And then what's also surprised me is how much easier it is now. And I think it's because some of that respect has traveled and people have become aware of some of the tech that we've built and different things. And they're all like, for example, many of the conversations of the technologies in the middle funnel, like the folks that are kind of like lead management or lead nurturing or whatever, all of those conversations go swimmingly because they're all saying, hey, our customers are just asking us for all of this marketing intelligence help. And we don't want to do that. We want to move lower funnel. But you guys seem like that's your exact focus. So perhaps you guys could do something for us there, take something over or be additive or something. So early conversations have gone great. And I guess the one other thing I'll say is in 2 years ago when we tried to do this, a lot of companies looked at us like we were a snake or something. They thought like they were like, hey, I'm worried about you being competitive. And now I've only heard that one time from probably I think I have 9 or 10 of these conversations active right now, and I've only heard it once. So it just seems like people are starting to believe that we are real authentic people and not just, someone that's trying to screw them over.
Yeah, thank God. Well, something that stood out to me is how unbaked, I guess, partnerships are. And I don't know how much of it's this industry, but, our experience so far, tell me if somehow you're reading it differently, has been, hey, what does this look like? What do you think? What might we do? Versus, I'll say my previous background, it was like, here's the contract, or do you want to partner or not? And part of that, again, may have been the size of the company that I was at before, where they knew they couldn't be that liberal or loose with it. But, I think that's the good and the bad, to be honest with you. I think that's an opportunity, and potentially for us, as we do mature to get, I guess, more systematized, using, one of your favorites, with how we approach these things. And no partnership. I mean, I don't like the rubber stamp or whatever. Like, I don't think that's, a great route either. But what I almost from an outsider, meaning, again, I often come in second on the conversation behind you, but as we start with, these really great conversations, and we say, okay, you could be an ally, we can be frenemies, whatever you want to call it. And they're fascinated to hear about our business, our vision plans, and we love to hear about theirs. But then things, I don't want to say stall out per se, but it's often like, okay, exactly where do we go from here? And then how serious is this going to become? Should it become? And that's, I feel like, where we're at right now. You've warmed up a lot of the discussions with some of these folks. But as we both know, we haven't really signed anything. And that's part of where I've said I'm a little hesitant because of our, wanting to be Switzerland, if you will, friendly with everybody. What happens if we ink a deal with Tour 24? I mean, just being open, and Pinwheel says, wait, what happened here? So can we play that role in this industry, or do you eventually have to shut down the conversation or get married? I think is what's most interesting right now based on discussions we've had this year.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's only 2 of the 10 companies that have partner managers. And so this is the first time I've done partnerships. So obviously like I'm like learning as I go, but the partner manager is like, when a company has that, I get excited. I'm like, hey, that means that you're committed to this and you also must have a system. I will say though, like those partner managers haven't come to me with like, hey, here's the process and how it's baked, and here's the timeline that we typically see. So I think that back to opportunity, we do this internally, building our own systems for, well, hiring process or whatever, taking best in class from everywhere. I feel like we have that opportunity here in this industry to like sort of set a stamp, be like, hey, this is the way we see partnerships. Here's kind of the criteria, here's like what an onboarding timeline would look like, yada, yada. And luckily we can set, because everything is open-ended, it's kind of like dating or something, right? You have these conversations like, you kind of attracted to me, I'm kind of attracted to you. And it's like, so we getting married, or are we like just gonna, whatever, now and then get dinner at Chili's. That's what it feels like. And so I think we get to come in and kind of like set the tone, since nobody else seems to be taking the lead or has like as baked of a process. And I think what I like is what you just said, like, about, well, you made me think about principles. So it's like there's a certain principle, and one of our principles is that we don't want to be exclusive. We want to be friendly with everybody. And that immediately like narrows things down, right? To say, all right, great. So what does that look like? Because we're not going to cut anybody out of the game. And the other thing, that I think is interesting is I feel like across the tech ecosystem, partnerships, there's some really good examples of great partnerships. Like I think about like Shopify, for example, like in these companies that have built massive platforms, that people can build an entire business off of. Now, whether we become a platform that people can build a business off of or not, that's, TBD. But I think we can take a lot of the learnings from a Shopify and say, how do you do this so that you're not, killing anybody, but yet like Shopify has some like autoresponder options for emails, but there's a lot of vendors in their marketplace that do autorespond or whatever receipt emails and stuff that are just slightly different. So I think there's a great like template, if you will, from some of these other large tech ecosystems that we can adopt and then go into these conversations and say, hey, here's how we're viewing it. We're not going to be exclusive. We would like to be additive to you. If you have an idea of how, you can be additive to us, that would be terrific. And here's the like standard terms and timeline that we're thinking about. And then finally put real, criteria in place. That's the other thing. There's a lot of people that have approached us over time and said, let's be partners. And then there's nothing official, and they don't have any KPIs or case studies or like, hey, we're going to commit X amount of resources to you, because it's going to distract us if we try to do a partner with somebody, right? So let's make sure that they're as committed to it as we are. So I think, again, we can help set some of these like KPI benchmarks. And frankly, I feel like you've been one of the most critical people I've heard about when someone says partnership, is like, show me the case study of the last one you did it with. And nobody has anything. They don't have anything to share or show about why so-and-so would be good for us. So I think we can set that example.
Yeah. Well, sticking you somewhere in the middle of that, I think is, you mentioned principles, the principle of the principles of the partnership. How much do you think cultural, alignment should matter? Because being Switzerland, if that's who we were or trying to become, in a way, is that a cop out where it's like we don't take positions or stances? And I know that's not the case. I'm just teeing this up. It's interesting. Had a coffee with Grace Harrison, one of our account coordinators. She's wonderful, and we were discussing moral decoupling. And she was just like, I'm really wrestling with this right now, because there's a lot of companies and institutions out there that I just fundamentally have a big problem with, but I still end up consuming their products. And, I don't know how we got there, but it was a really interesting thread, and it's pretty intense when you get into it. And I think that, that spills over into stuff like partnerships, because at what point do you jeopardize your own brand? Because I remember that early on. I don't know if you remember this conversation that we had with Elaine Williams, who was, our early, first year consultant. But she was like, I know right now you guys are just trying to network, but you really have to be careful here, because there's some people that you may hit it off with, think it's a good thing, and then you drop that name with somebody else, or in this industry for that matter, and people will look at you differently. And so that's not an easy thing to suss out, especially like in the first hour of a call. So that's something that I will just say I hope, if not expect, that we'll take very seriously. That it's not just about the business opportunity, but that our core values still really need to feel like a good fit for us to move forward. I just expect Digible to be highly selective, in every way when it comes to who we work with.
Well, that was a great fork in the conversation, but sounds like you or Grace were munching on Chick-fil-A, and you guys had a ethical concern about that.
I don't know why I should be bashful about saying that. Yeah, that definitely was one. But Miranda and I were just watching the Mia Farrow Woody Allen documentary, and it'll make you not ever want to watch a Woody Allen film again. At least that was our take. And funny enough, no kidding, we just had an option with the girls on our movie night, and it was like Bug's Life or I think Ants or something. And Ants had Woody Allen, and Miranda just turned to me. She's like, "This is an easy call." I was like, "Well, all right, here we go. Are we ever going to listen to Thriller again, like during Halloween?"
Mm-hmm.
It just goes on and on. But what I love about many of the books we're reading, especially Jim Collins, he says it's so much harder. I mean, it's an obvious statement, but it's still important to say it, to maintain your core values throughout your life in every way. And so I think that is hard when you think as startups, whether to sell or not to a real page and everything in between, which is more where we're at, that we're not looking to sell anytime soon, but we are looking very aggressively right now. I think it's fair to say, we're being more proactive about building partnerships, and we don't really know these people yet, as we get to know them, I hope that will be a big part of where we actually decide who we do and don't want to spend time with.
Well, before I give my response, I think this does apply to like you're more the sports guy than I am, but isn't that? I mean, what would Popovich, your beloved Popovich, say, right? Because I remember we talked about Save the Last Dance and how they're saying you can only have one Dennis Rodman on the team, but when it comes to core values, that would infect your core values, right? If someone really didn't match, and we have a system, we'll talk about EOS someday, and just more length, but where we grade every employee on core values and they have to match. But when it comes to partnerships, I think that's kind of what you're getting at. So sort of like, let's look at the sports team first. Like there's a lot of athletes that haven't done great things, but you might still be a fan, right? And that you have to somehow separate that. And I'll just say from the outside, I feel like I can appreciate someone's performance in sports regardless of their personal life, but it doesn't have no effect on me. Like I'm still like, man, they're talented and I can appreciate that, but that doesn't mean I like who they are as a person. But how does that work with, some of the, like a Popovich?
Well, I can only speculate, but, I think, well, I don't think he is known to have some of the most rigid, core values and discipline to those values of any professional coach in the world. And, it's something to be admired. He also, I think, pisses off a few people, and he's more outspoken about it. I'll just say, like, who he will or won't, I guess, get kind of behind. For us, I think it would honestly, it should come down to survival. And even then, I don't know if you and I and Nicole would be willing to compromise our core values. Let's just use the, theoretical, but where it's a business that we know is not treating their employees right, or they have a really bad reputation, but they have tremendous scale and they are a lock and key fit with us, like on our technology. And it's like, this is just a no brainer. Would we stop that from happening because of their reputation, what we've heard, what we've learned? And I hope that we do. I really, feel that way. I feel strongly actually about it. If we were potentially compromising the existence of our company and our employees, I don't want to say, I mean, that probably doesn't sound good, but I put that as like ultimate priority is taking care of our people, And so that may be like a temporary, I'll just say, decision where it's like, we're entering into this agreement. It's not, the best fit for us, maybe culturally, but it will do a huge amount of benefit to the business. And then we'll reevaluate, blah, blah, blah. But that would be what I hope is a true rarity. I really want to love the people that we're working with, not just our direct clients, but yeah, these business partners.
Yeah. Did you I think this applies. I'm just trying to look for the tweet, but did you see the Twitter war between I think it's a senator from New Hampshire and Twitter or sorry, and Amazon? Is it
No, I
I
haven't.
think is it Ron Paul or Rand Paul or
No, he's Kentucky.
shoot? I man, I need to find this now. Basically, there's a senator, very popular one that I recognize his face, but terrible with the names. He said, "Hey, something about like we need to be honest about like minimum wage and like why is the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, not paying his workers fairly?" And there was and minimum wage is still at $11.20. And one of the like chief executives from Amazon responded back and said, well, what we question is why you've been senator for 30 years in your state and your minimum wage is $11.20 and Amazon pays a minimum of $15 and gives health care day one. Like maybe you should look inwardly before you like criticize outwardly or something. And I was just like, whoa, shots across the bow. And that was like last week. And that's not to say that like Amazon couldn't afford to pay their workers more, but it is just, but it's interesting how big tech is starting to like bristle and push back a little bit on, on government and criticism.
Yeah, they're easy targets. And right now, in particular with politicians, like they're just getting hit from every direction. And so it's an easy thing for politicians to jump on. So I applaud the fact they're pushing back. I think there's also a lot of reality to some of the criticism. So yeah, there's all sorts of public wars that are happening.
Yeah. So where I was going to get to is I think that that I think ties into this conversation. But I actually think of Chasten, who was at the Digible Summit last year. One of one of the partners at Blanton Turner, and I remember when Black Lives Matter came out really strong. They, as a company, were like, "Well, we're going to sever ties with all of our customers that don't support this movement." And I was like, well, shoot, I never heard anything that strong before. Now, I don't know how many, owners they kicked out because whatever, like, that they decided not to do business with because they don't support it. But I love that kind of like, statement. And so back to your comment on for core values, I don't think we can expect every, official partner of ours to have the same core value set, because that means now you've got to adopt our 5 core values. You can't have yours, right? But I do think there can be certain principles that we set where, to your point, that we should uncover during the process. I think about this, like I told you, I've been reading that book, the Who book, about who to hire and how to make sure you don't make an accidental poor hire. And I think the same thing that goes when you're hiring someone, the same sort of process should be when you're looking at hiring, if you will, a partner, right? And say, all right, well, pose the core value question to them and see where they'd compromise or not. And we should have our list of values that we're not going to compromise. Right. So I'll give an example, but I don't think they'd mind sharing. But when we talked to funnel leasing last week, the topic of fair housing came up, and the CEO was like that, we are super dedicated to fair housing. We, in fact, we're donating $1 of every application fee that we collect to a fair housing charity. And I was like, well, that is cool. That's kind of like the whole 1%, club or whatever. So I don't have a lot more details than that, but that is like a positive core value to me to say like, hey, these people are interesting and could line up with what we care a lot about. Therefore, they might make a good partner. But if we have someone else that's all about, well, whatever, EBITDA or something, it's like, well, that's maybe not the most important thing for us.
Yeah. And I think in many ways it is like interviewing. I mean, it should be, right? A job candidate, it's hard to get it all figured out on one interview. And so while we're not perfect, we take it very seriously, as we should. And most employers see it the same way, but got to go through a pretty thorough process to really, uncover who somebody is and what you might expect from them, were they to join your company. And it's the same way. And I think that is one of the reasons, but it's not a bad thing that some of these things take a while, And it's also about the position you're in. You mentioned Blanton and Chasten. I loved that too. I thought that was wonderful. But you got to be in a position, to make those kinds of decisions. And a lot of early stage companies or startups just don't ever even get to that spot. And so I don't want to say sell their soul, but they're so desperate. Their survival does rest on quickly building partnerships because they're not capable of building, direct relationships, you could say in our case, the way we were able to. And so what do you do then? I think you have to prioritize survival and then eventually build yourself up in a position where you can be more selective. But I think, just, I guess, ending here is just again, expect us within the next couple of years to have a short list. I don't expect us to try and, I guess, overplay this and just sign up. So I really want to get connected and have meaningful partnerships, not just have logo soup on our website where it's like, these guys are partnered with everybody. It's like, that's not, at least for me, that's not what I'm looking for as we get further into it.
Yeah, I think we could get a logo soup with pretty simply because everyone wants to be connected with someone, right? So I agree with you. I think we back to our commit to this is if we're going to call someone a partner, there's a real reason behind it, and our team should be able to speak to it. Secondly, I feel back to takeaways. One is we need to basically come up with our principles that we're saying we're not going to cross these. And so you got to meet these criteria, if you will, or it's just not going to work for us. We don't mind being friendly, but it's not going to work for us. And then also identify what a real commitment means. So to your point, we can't, being that I'm kind of heading this up right now, I've only got so much bandwidth. So I couldn't take 3 people in Q2, 3 companies in Q2, because we're not going to really be able to move the needle or show our real support for someone behind that. So I guess my message is for anybody listening is you may see, as Reid was saying, we're going to get, pretty specific with who we, officially stamp, let's say a Digible partner. We're going to have real reasons behind that, but we also don't want to be, we're not going to be exclusive. So even if we start with one bot company, for example, that doesn't mean we're not going to get the other bot companies up to speed, right? Because we want to be that universal adapter in Switzerland, right? It just means that we may only have the, capacity to handle one a quarter, right? And we want to be committed to that, so it doesn't just fall flat and we lose, excitement from everybody.
Yeah. The last thing we want to do is dilute this initiative, by moving too quickly or bring in, too many folks at once. I'd rather get them right. And then that's more the case study you look for, as you mentioned. I don't know if it was while we were still recording, but I'm always curious to hear, what did the last partnership, or what does a partnership look like? And we don't always get, in fact, very rarely do we get very good answers there. I'd like us to have a good one, where it's we did this is how we approached it, and we grew into that. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I think that will, just organically, I guess, produce better partnerships for us in the long term, for Digible.
Yeah. And let me, again, just make one more statement clear that may not be, is we may say, let's say we partner with Jonah or something on websites. That doesn't mean, that might mean that our team, we share data with Jonah, they share data with us, and we do some case studies and we do education so that our team is fully onboarded and can, navigate their tool and so on and so forth. But that, if we do that, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't then be friends with Zeki or some other website company. So we can still, we can and we still would accept the data from whoever your current website provider is and do all the conversion points that we need. It just, our team may not be as officially trained up, let's say product experts like they would be from the official partnership. But it doesn't mean we're not willing to. So I don't want it to come off now, let's say Digible's partnered with Jonah, and so now they're not going to be great with our G5 website, right? It's that wouldn't be the case at all. If anything, whatever we do is just going to be additive and set the mold for what future website, agreements would look like.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and a lot of this is, started with you, but I think, more or less anybody now that people speak to at Digible understand we're just looking to be thought leaders and as impartial as we can be. And, because of that, not because of that, but I'll just say most companies that are around, there is something good about them. And that's where we try to focus the conversation. I mean, maybe there is some, fair constructive feedback or criticism that we offer up about, companies, but typically it's if anybody's been around for a little bit, there's something that we can say, hey, but if we don't know, to your point about the training, then how do we communicate that? So that's a big part of this too. It may not land with a bunch of legit like paper contracts or agreements, but it will come with us having that much better understanding of all these different, USPs, differentiators, so that we're ambassadors, frankly, for everybody in the industry. And we hope that the same is spoken about us.
Yeah. Well, this will be an updated conversation as we go about it. Reid and I were talking a lot about how a lot of this podcast is us learning in public, and we just want to share, as we think through things. And, just as we learn, let's be open about it. So I could see this turning into, as we set our partnership strategy, just something that we end up open sourcing and putting on the website to say, here's our template, here's how we think about it from principles, here's the timeline. But we, with everything that we do, we like to share it with as many people as we can and let them either poke holes in it or get a benefit out of the work that we did as well.
Totally.
All right, Reid. Well, you good?
I'm good.
Yeah. You're laying in your bed, so you can just like pull your hat down over your eyes and take a seat.
Well, Mondays at 3:00, I'm bouncing around. So, I'm comfortable though.
Yeah.
That's all
totally. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week.